Fantastic. Okay. And then I will also make my husband the host, and how I will do that is I will figure it out by Jamie. Jamie, can you hop in here and tell me how to record this or how to make him host?
Whenever
Co-host.
you're in your
Oh, wait, I know, 3
participants,
dots and make co-host. There we go.
didn't even need me.
I learned a few things since the last time I did this, and technology has made it its undying pledge to teach me a new lesson and keep me humble. So I continue to be on that journey. I always appreciate that I start this out humbly because I get nervous, and then I have to remind myself I'm just a human being in the space, and that's all there is to it. So I first want to encourage everybody, while you're waiting for, we're going to give people a couple more minutes to get on here, to go ahead and drop your email address in the chat so that you can get the playback for this, and also so we can keep in touch and you can kind of see what's going on. So yes, so everyone feel free to drop your email address in there. I also will have my assistant, Jamie McQuarrie. She's going to give you all the links to our email. So our email, theinsideoutexperience@gmail.com. She's going to give you guys our social media. So you're going to be able to connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube. And tonight we're giving everyone a free copy, PDF download of my REST workbook. So it's not the book itself, it's the workbook. However, if you do want a copy of my book, feel free to click on the links in the chat to go right to Amazon and get your copy. Something else you'll see in here, this trauma cert, you'll see that in the chat. That's actually a trauma certification specialist. I am in the first round of teachers who are internationally certified to teach that course, and we actually start next week. So if that's something that interests you, you want more information, feel free to check that out as well. Obviously, you can see we have YouTube on there, so don't forget to like and subscribe to all of the things. And that's going to get us started. And to kind of manage expectations tonight, we've done this little bit of housekeeping. We're going to also step into Coach Reverend PJ behind me is going to actually lead us through a somatic exercise. And you're not obligated at all to do this exercise. It's just if it feels right to you, because I'm going to be sending a lot of information your way. Some of you will have seen some of this before, and some of you will have never seen this information before. And so to really help you grasp all that, all of this information that's going to be coming your way, you can get the playback, but also I wanted our nervous systems to be prepared and opened to take that in. And that's what this exercise is going to do. It's literally a nervous system reset. So you'll get to experience from the inside out what it's like to reset your nervous system and then be able to take in information more fully. Welcome, David. Good to see you.
Are you serious? Come on.
And let's see. Anyone else? I'm going to go ahead. Does anyone have any questions or comments before we get started?
Zoom call.
Who's that? No, okay. All right, cool. All right. So with that, Reverend PJ, would you like to jump on here? I will find you and I will. All right, give him just a second. 3 minutes? Okay, 3 minutes.
So I'm just going to teach you guys how to reset your nervous system in about 3 minutes. Okay, actually, if I'm being perfectly honest, you are resetting your nervous system with every time that you inhale and exhale. Every time you inhale, you stimulate your sympathetic or your fight or flight nervous system. Pepper will explain what that means at some point during the
We can only see your torso.
Oh, sorry. And of course, every time that you exhale, you stimulate your parasympathetic or your rest and digest nervous system. Again, Pepper's going to be explaining more about that as we go.
Yeah, take that with you.
Okay.
We just cannot see you.
So the first thing that we want to do is what I call shake it out, okay? And what that involves is, again, if it feels right to you, just move your body, move your hands, your legs, your feet, do a little dance if you want, bounce, jump if you're feeling like it. But just get your body moving, and don't forget to breathe through all of these things, okay? The next thing we want to do is I want you to focus on something that is in front of you, or if there's nothing in front of you, just stare off into the horizon of the room that you're in, or stare out of a window, but just focus on something in front of you. And I want you to hold that focus for about 10 seconds. Don't forget to breathe. Three more seconds. Okay. Now, this next one can be a little difficult for some people, so don't feel bad if that's you. What I want you to do is, without moving your head, look as far as you can to your left. And we're going to hold that for 20 seconds. Ready, go. Ten more seconds. Three, two, one. Okay, you can let that go now. Now the next one, we're just going to look as far as we can to the right without moving your head. Starting now. Ten more seconds. Okay, and let it go. Now, this next one we're going to do, we're just going to take some deep breaths. And remember what I told you when we began about your breath. This is the real grounding work right here, okay? So if you like, you can put your hand on your stomach so that you can feel yourself letting your air in and letting your air out. So the first thing we want to do, we're going to take a deep breath in through our nose, and we're going to count to 3. Then we're going to release out of our mouth to the count of 6. And we're going to do a few of those. Okay? Is everybody ready? Of course you are. And breathe in, 2, 3, and breathe out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Inhale. And exhale. One more time, inhale to the count of 3. And exhale. Okay, now for these next 2 breaths, we're going to do the exact same breath pattern, but this time I want you to make a sound when you exhale, like a hum or an ah or a sigh or whatever, but feel the sound that you're making vibrating in your body as well while you're doing that. Starting now, inhale, exhale. Ah. Inhale, exhale. One last time. Inhale, exhale. Now just release all of the tension from your body as best you can.
All right. Excellent. Thank you so much for that. I hope you all feel a little more in your bodies. It's easy when you've been going through the workday, especially this is Friday, so we've all been working hard to get here. So it's so important to get to end the day with being fully and completely in your body. Your body is what's keeping the score of any trauma you have suffered in life, and it's also what's keeping the healing. So being in our bodies, we have this vessel for a reason, and it's much more magical than just being able to rest and digest. And so with that, I would like to actually talk about a function that our bodies have, which is that production of tears. I want to talk about tears and their meaning tonight as we open up, because I feel like a lot of people believe they understand their emotions. And the one thing about it is that tears don't lie. So I'd like to go ahead and show you. All right, and show you my presentation. Please don't suddenly tell me I can't screen share. There we go. I can't, I know, it's just being silly. Okay. Technology. Okay. So I want to walk you through tears and their meaning. So there are 3 types of tears that we have. There are Vata, Pitta, and Kapha tears. And you'll notice where each one lands. The Vata tear is on the innermost corner. Pitta is about the middle of your lower eyelid, and Kapha is going to be the outer. Okay. And this is significant, and I will tell you why. Oops, go back. Jumped ahead a little bit. Okay, so Vata tear is the first tier. All right. These are fear, insecurity, overwhelm, and loss of control. They fall from the innermost corner of the eye, and they have a bitter taste to them. Now, you'll see that I say when you see these kind of tears, respond to them with courage. That doesn't mean loud. That doesn't mean bullying. That doesn't mean abrasive. It just can sometimes mean we're just going to sit calmly in the space. Or sit with the discomfort of these tears. So when you see these tears, sit with them. When you have the feelings of fear and insecurity and overwhelm and loss of control, these are also parts of an attachment cry and a need that has gone unmet. So next we have Pitta tears, and they feel like anger, frustration, and jealousy. So not the same as the fearful overwhelm that we saw before. These tears you're going to see a lot with narcissism. When you have someone who right here, just a very dramatic, hot tear right here, it's oftentimes an anger, frustration, jealousy tear. And it falls from the mid-lower eye. It's salty. It's salty and appropriately so. When someone is being salty, they probably have Pitta tears, okay? And these are ones you get curious around, because anger, frustration, and jealousy is related or often triggered by shame. And the anti of shame is curiosity. And so we'll get into that a little bit more later, but just keep that in mind. Next, we have the Kapha tears. And these are tears of compassion, joy, and grief. And a lot of times we have been taught like joy lives over on this side and grief lives over on this side. And actually they're a couple. They live together. And if you have one, you have the other. When you have joy, there's also a grief that can be happening. These also fall out of the outermost corner of the eye. So those are that silent tear, okay? These are sweet tears. And when you see these tears, respond to them with compassion. Often I have clients in front of me who they think they're feeling one thing and their tears are telling me they're feeling another. And you can be feeling several things at once and have all of the tears, but the tears don't lie. What you're really feeling, it's going to show up in the water, in the tears. So tears and their meaning. Water is life and tears are life that's being lived. So you want to respond to them with compassion, courage, and curiosity. Please ignore this. No, it is the right phone number. Good, I did get that correct. We just changed our phone number, so I was like, oh no. But if you have more questions about tears, you have seen certain tears weaponized against you, or if you feel like you just want better understanding around what could be coming up if you're experiencing more than one kind of tear at a time, feel free to reach out. And I'd be happy to walk through that with you. So that's tears and their meaning. And while we're over here, let's go ahead and talk about why we're really here today, which is alchemy. So welcome to the Inside Out experience. This is the coaching company that my husband and I opened up a few years ago, and I work as a certified trauma recovery coach, and he is an intuitive energy healer. He's also, I call him the shaman, but he goes by Reverend PJ. So who am I besides your host? I am a trauma alchemist. I am at the supervisory certification level for trauma recovery coaching, and I'm also an instructor for the International Association of Trauma Recovery Coaches. I'm going to just very gently embarrass Rachel Thompson in the space tonight because she has a bigger part to play in this than I've given her credit for through the years. She hosts hashtag sex abuse chats on Twitter. And almost 10 years ago, might be right at 10 years actually, was one of the first times I got on Twitter and started talking and telling my story. And it was through that chat that I was able to share my story. And I found Bobby Parrish and Athena Moberg, and a few other people in the space that have gone on to be part of this trauma recovery. And Bobby is the one who started the International Association of Trauma Recovery Coaching because she wanted healing to be accessible around the world. And that has also been my heart's cry. And so a few years ago, I got my initial certification. I didn't do a whole lot with it initially, but I moved into the space of this really was my passion. Healing is a lifelong journey. And I didn't appreciate the way that Western medicine was really pathologizing and creating more harm than help, and how oftentimes in seeking help, I would have to advocate for myself. I had to deal with waiting lists. I had to deal with different medications and like, is this working? And then once it is working, how long is it working before I plateau or poop out with it, as they would say? And so it was very, it felt like I just had this life sentence of healing that really was just about maintaining survival. And I did not appreciate it. So I joined the association, and I learned that really the truth is that if it's within me, and this is where my theory comes from, if it's within me to have trauma responses and reactions, it makes sense that it's also in my DNA to know how to heal, to know how to live a life that's my best. And it can't be all gloom and doom and recovery. So that's where rest is born, and that is my theory that we'll get into a little bit more in just a moment. I'm also an author. I'm a survivor of childhood abuse and trafficking. Trigger warning, it's related to rape and incest. So of course, that gets heavy really fast for a lot of people, but it just also shows you that like you can really go to the depths of hell and come back and do
just you and me home.
So, hey, Becca, welcome. I'm going to mute you.
Oh, sorry.
You're all good. I'm so glad you're here. Okay. So let's talk about the definition of alchemy. A seemingly magical process of transformation, creation, or combination. And I bring this definition out because I want people to know that everyone's capable of alchemy. And everyone is a magical process in transformation and creation, and or a combination of that. Everyone is. Okay. Oops, let's go the correct direction. So tonight, what you're going to learn is how to identify when you're in a headspace of survival, trauma, and negativity. You're going to learn how to connect with what is keeping you from success in order to alchemize it, and how to alchemize all of the things through mind, body, and soul work. So that's another piece about the healing process that I don't think Western psychology has made room for, the very real fact that it is also soul work. Real healing work requires soul work, not religious work, but soul work. And I will define that a little bit more for you as we keep going. So rest is my restorative response system theory. And you see rhythm, rise, resolve, and reframe over here. I'm going to go over in a little bit what those mean, but these are essentially the answer to every fight, flight, freeze, and fawn response you have. So if you're having a fight, flight, freeze, fawn reaction, you are going to have a rhythm, rise, resolve, reframe response. And yes, thank you, Rachel Thompson. This is my book. And this is the book. It's called Rest, the Restorative Response System Theory, Living Your Best Life from the Inside Out, Taking the Science of Healing Soul Deep. That's so important to me that we understand that our body is the filter for which trauma is stored. It's also the filter for where healing is had. And there's psychological wounding that happens here, and we can't discount that because our neural pathways, our nervous system are all working together to create the narratives that we live by and the ways we choose to survive. But with that, there's also a soul nerve, and I will show you where that is born in our bodies. So what is trauma? Trauma is an emotional response to a terrible event like an accident, rape, or natural disaster. Trauma is also held in the body, or your soma. It is the inflammation or activation of your autonomic nervous system in service of survival. It is generational, it is communal, it is individual, internal, and it's also treatable. Trauma is a complete brain to bone disruption. I used to say brokenness, but I don't believe we're actually broken. I just think that's the perception we have been fed. But I do believe that as energetic and magnetic beings that we experience a disruption between our brains and our bodies because of trauma. And it calls us to reach to our souls, to our inner selves, to our higher selves. You can call it source energy, whatever that greater power is than this millisecond of breathing. It's calling us to reach to that. So let's talk about the types of trauma and their scope of experience. So you can have an acute trauma, and unfortunately in America, this one didn't age well because shooter situations happen way too frequently. A communal trauma can also be a chronic thing like a pandemic. A communal trauma can also be something as complex as war. War creates poverty, it creates a lack of resources, and it ruins education systems. It ruins a lot of systems that support community. And so complex trauma on a communal level is going to look like war. On an individual level, an acute trauma is going to look more like I scraped my knee, I had a one-off accident. Chronically, it's going to look something more like that lower back pain or those rain knees that we seem to start developing at a certain age. That's that more chronic trauma. And then there's complex trauma, which could be any of the other traumas I just told you about, plus one or all of these. Okay. And trauma in their scope of experience, you can experience it precognitively. If you've ever sat there and you've started telling yourself a story and you've like catastrophized and you're like, this is the worst thing that could happen in that moment, that's a survival thing, but it's also how you can be experiencing trauma that hasn't even happened. So precognitively, you can experience trauma. Preconceptually, before you had a clue about a clue, you can have trauma in the body because it's also generational. Pre-verbal, so before you're even able to speak, before you can even understand what trauma is, you can have experience with trauma. Now, I bring in the chakra system because I want to throw something out there just to keep an open mind. The chakra system, as you can see, is numbered from bottom to top, and I just want you to get a look at this, noticing where the root chakra is, the sacral chakra, all the way up to the crown chakra. Because what I have found fascinating is when it comes to energy sources in the body, energy spaces and where there's a lot of trapped energy or stagnant energy happening, it's often in one of these related areas of where the chakras land. And it also makes sense how to respond to it with the rest theory, because these chakras also line up with how your nervous system works in your body. And I'm going to show you that. So whether you believe in this or not, just know that it actually can be influential on how you might work with a client or with yourself when you start recognizing what nervous system you might be in. Okay. So here's the brain. And I also wanted to show you the chakras in the brain and how they line up, because back here, so you'll see this third eye chakra. We kind of say that it lands like on the forehead. And then there's the crown chakra. The crown chakra actually doesn't rest above the head. In the original art showing where the chakras land, right here is where the crown chakra lands. And it's interesting that it lands there, because you'll see that this is in the temporal lobe where the thalamus and the amygdala reside. The amygdala is in the almond shaped part of your brain. And cute side story here, the first blooms we have every year in the spring are the almond blossom. So when you're looking at the amygdala, I want you to remember the almond blossom, because it's also where the first peak of consciousness is found in the human brain. As it's developing, the amygdala is that first piece of consciousness that comes online. It's also where your soul nerve is connected in your brain. Your vagus nerve connects right there between the thalamus and the amygdala, where your consciousness is born, your first bloom. Okay. So it doesn't reside on top of the scalp, but rather on the innermost cords at the meeting point of the aforementioned, being the thalamus and the amygdala. All right. Come on. Why'd you fall asleep on me? Oh, here we go. No, we went too far. Okay. Yes. All right. Oh, come on, Apple. Play nice. Okay. So let's just take a moment here and get comfortable. Get comfortable in your soul, get comfortable in your mind and in your body. And I want to check in with our sensory system. So when we think of our sensory system, we're thinking sight, hearing, tasting, smelling. And I want you to think about that from a physical state. And then I want you to think about that from an emotional state, a mental state, and then think about how, if at all, your soul might sense this. There was a really cute exercise I watched the other day. Not cute, it was a great exercise. It was more than cute, but it was about relating color to a sensation, to a thought, to a part. And I'll get into parts work a little bit more, but it helped to, because the color that was brought up, you could feel that color. You know, when you think of yellow, you might feel bright and cheery, and you might feel it in your whole body, like this, just a lighter, like, okay. And if you see red, you might feel a little more agitated, a little more intense. And so colors can be helpful. And maybe you're sitting here and you're kind of going through, what do I see? What do I taste? What do I smell? What am I hearing? What's my emotional state? And a color might come up for you. And I encourage you to feel into that color. And I encourage you to feel into your body. Is there any pain or pressure anywhere? Is there a felt sense of safety? Would you even know what that would be? And then also, is there any kind of urgency or activated feelings in your nervous system? And you may not know the answer, but I just want to bring an awareness to these parts of ourselves that we just often, we're just so busy going, we forget that we have these things. We have all these filters that help us have a unique orientation to the world and experience with it. Why did you go backwards again? Here, let me move this over. There we go. Okay. So I want to introduce right now Dr. Bowen's family system theory, because a lot of us forget that we matter in the world. And Dr. Bowen's family system theory says that it's very similar to, I believe it was Aristotle, who had the egocentric universe. It's very similar to that, except I would say that the sun is not the ego so much as the self, the authentic self, the spiritual self. And then outside of that, you have the largest organism, your body, your skin. And then you start moving out into your caregivers and your siblings, and it's going to move from there to your cousins, your aunts and uncles, your grandparents. You're going to get extended family. You're going to move into your social space, which is school and work and any extracurriculars you participate in. Until you get out to that more multicultural space. And this is how our universes look. And we then take these universes, okay, so Dr. Bowen's system says this is what it looks like. the self, and then there's all these layers outward. And then we internalize that. And sometimes we internalize it correctly with us as the sun, and sometimes we internalize it with the sun being a more dominant aspect of our entire family system. So that could be religion, that could be politics, that could be a matriarch or patriarch who's a caregiver. And by putting them in the space of the sun, we kind of disorient our whole universe. And then we're functioning in a universe where instead of seeing ourselves in a space and having an effect in that space, we're being affected by everything else in the space. And it's just a matter of perception that just really isn't the rest of the story in reality. But I'll get to why in a minute. All right. So Dr. Bowen's nuclear family system, here's a little more clear cut, individual, nuclear family, extended family, social circle, multicultural. It's important to remember when we're working with others that they have different cultural backgrounds. They have different religious backgrounds. They have different geographical and socioeconomic contexts. And all of these things can inform how a person is perceiving something to be traumatic or not. It can also inform how somebody sees something to be shameful or not. And that matters when we're having conversations with each other, because if we're thinking that they're supposed to think like us, they're supposed to behave like us, we are then dehumanizing them and taking away their right to individuality. And we're also doing the same thing to ourselves by thinking, we've got it figured out. We can't grow. We're not open-minded because we've already done our research or whatever the thing is. Okay. So here's a little bit more what it looks like. And I just remind us all that in our universe, you're the sun, and the sun doesn't do anything. The sun isn't the one that does the orbiting. The sun isn't the one, it shines. It just is. It's too hot to take down, and it just exists. It doesn't have to do anything, and it feeds the planets too, right? It keeps things in orbit. It can draw things in. It can exclude things out with its orbit, and so can we. We can make a different choice. We can decide what we want in our universe, and we can decide what doesn't work in our universe, because we are the sun of our universe. Okay, so I was hoping that in this picture, whenever I pulled it, I'd be able to show you the amygdala. It didn't work out that way, but I can still show you what the thalamus looks like and what the hippocampus looks like. And these are important because when you're talking about a traumatized brain, especially in an adolescent, there's a part of your brain that swells. And that part of your brain swells because it's telling all of the rest of your functions to shut down, cool it. We don't have time to be chit-chatting and filing away time and date and things of that nature. We have to go into survival mode. And so when that swells, then there's this little thing down here that starts to shrink. And it's shrinking because it's telling your nervous system to flush this body with adrenaline right now, so that you can run, so that you can fight, so that you can either hyperfreeze, hypofreeze, or fawn your way out of a situation that your brain deemed dangerous and unsafe. Okay, so that's what the brain is doing there. These are the 4 trauma responses. So as you can see, we have fight, we have flight, we have freeze, and we have fawn. And I want to walk you through each of these. So fight is everyone pretty much knows fight or flight. Fewer people know freeze, and even fewer people know fawn. And about as many people understand that freeze can be a hyperfreeze or a hypofreeze. And I'll get into those in just a moment. But on that hyperfreeze, hypofreeze, so a hyperfreeze is going to be more like that deer in the headlights. That's the one that takes your breath away. That's the one that you're like, oh, shock, wasn't ready for that, don't know how to function in that. Sometimes you'll be in the middle of a conversation and your brain will just go completely offline. And that could be indicative of a hyperfreeze. A hypofreeze is going to be more of this possum playing dead. Like you can't, sometimes it'll look like, we call it dorsal shutdown. Can't move, can't articulate, nothing is computing upstairs. And that is going to be your more hypofreeze. And how you know which one you're in, you probably won't in the moment that it's happening be able to tell which one you're in. You'll probably have to wait till you come on out of it. However, if you're with a trauma recovery coach or a certified trauma specialist, they're going to see and they're going to have gathered from the conversation they were having up to that point what one you might be in. And you might be in both. Your nervous system is ridiculously capable of being in several trauma reactions at one time. Okay. Now, the fawning response. So I'm a fawner. I love to people please. I'm all about keeping the peace until I'm not, because I'm also a Scorpio. I'm also very appeasement heavy. I will mimic a person. I will mirror behaviors, whatever it takes to avoid the conflict. I was called an old soul when I was a kid, and I could perform. I had great performative good behavior. I didn't actually care to behave, but I could perform my way through it. And that is what a lot of people who fawn do. Those that tend to lean heavy in fawning are often the targets of narcissists. Narcissists love somebody who want to please them and keep the peace for them and want to appease them and who want to mimic their behaviors until they want to weaponize all of that against them. And fawning is the kind of response that I have said before will have you participating in your own trauma in service to survive. So when you start on a path and you have to start making choices in service to survival, you have to start stealing to provide food for your family, or you have to start hitting yourself in front of your abuser so that they won't hit you harder. Like, these are things that survivors do. These are all fawning mechanisms, and they are all things that I hope today to help you combat shame around, because while it might sound crazy to others, it was a perfectly normal and logical reaction to a ridiculously abnormal and dangerous situation. And there's no shame in that. Your body was imprinted genetically to do this thing, and it did it, and it survived. And that's what matters. And there's no shame in it. Not sure why this came up again. Let's keep moving. Maybe it just decided to have a hiccup. Super not where we've already been through all these. Yes, okay. So it's weird that it went backwards, but technology just wanted me to know tonight, like, it's here for this. So apologies, we'll get there. Oh, here we go. There's that. There we go, right there. Okay, so rhythm, rise, resolve, and refrain. In my book, I tell this story, and I'll share it here as well. One day I was working on this very book, The Rest, Restorative Response System Theory, and I was explaining to my partner that when it comes to the fight response, I really feel like rhythm is the answer. And he was like, okay, that's nice. And he was in the middle of creating some content for our social media platform. If you know anything about what it's like to be a business owner and entrepreneur, you're wearing all of the hats and doing all of the things. And so he's creating this video, he's trying to get this content out. There's this one last word or phrase or tag that nothing is working. It's just frustrating. And so he grabs now mind you, he's just told me that's nice, honey. And then he goes over to his keyboard and he's just like talking about the struggle he's having with this content piece. And he gets on his keyboard and he starts listening to a song and he starts playing a little bit here on the keys. And don't you know, in about 10 minutes, he's not only figured out this song that he hasn't played for years, by the way. We're talking closer to 20 years. That he's even listened to this song, and now he's playing it on his keyboard. Not only has he completed that, but suddenly, boom, oh, this content piece wraps up nicely. He's able to post it in the same hour and he's done. And he's just so proud of himself. And I'm just sitting there like, just very calm. It was very patient for me. I was very patient. And I was like, way to go, honey. You figured it out. You resourced yourself. And it suddenly clicked for him. Oh my goodness, this is exactly what you were saying. I just needed to get some rhythm so that I could move out this freezing response or this fight response that I was having. And it was all through the rhythm of the music. And when you think about music, right, like there's dynamic, there's breaks, there is timing, all of that in rhythm. And it helped his body not just only recollect this old memory and be able to play a song in its entirety, but also unlock a present day issue he was having. So that's why rhythm, that's one of the examples I use to show how rhythm works. Rise, I'm talking about rising to meet yourself. It's, if I were to say to you, calm down when you're in a moment of distress, it's literally the last thing you're going to be capable of doing. But if I see that you are darting around in conversation with me and you are in a flight response, you're in avoidance to something, I'm going to know to back off whatever that thing is. But then I also want to rise to meet you there. Where are you going? Like, have you ever had that person you've been in a conversation with and they're just running on at the mouth and just on and on and on and on and on and on. And you're like, rabbit, slow down. And when that happens, instead of telling them that they're talking too much or what they're saying is confusing or chaotic or any of that, rise to meet them in the space. What is it that they're not saying maybe? What is it that what is the message that they're really sending? Sometimes, again, we think we know what we're thinking and feeling and doing. And the truth is that our body is giving all other social cues. And if we're paying attention to a person's body, again, the filter for which people operate from either trauma or healing, we're going to learn a lot more about what that person is going through, living with, existing in, beyond what's being said from their mouth. Okay. Freeze. So for freeze, we have resolve. Resolve is basically like thawing out. How do I get this person to resolve? Resolving is a really, this one is where I use a lot of breath work and I use a lot of getting them present in the moment. So that's whenever I asked you earlier, what do you see? What do you taste? What do you smell? What are you feeling emotionally? What are you feeling? Physically? These are different. And by orienting the person to this moment and doing exercises like what Rev PJ did when he opened up this class today, that helps them get back in their body. Then they can resolve out of the freeze and move forward. All right. But until they get back in touch with their bodies and back into this moment, it's really hard to expect anyone to have executive function to move forward. All right. Now for fawning, I have in here reframe. Reframing is a powerful tool that we use at the association to help do several things. Help people reframe their truth in compassion, and also help combat shame. When we stay curious and we start asking gentle, compassionate questions, we start combating all the damage of what a fawning survival response can feel like in somebody's body. And I'll give you a few examples of that as we keep going here. But I want to now shift gears a little bit and talk about shame, because if you're going to do healing work with mind, body, soul work, it's important to understand shame. So shame, the definition for shame is a painful feeling of humiliation or distress caused by the consciousness of wrong or foolish behavior. So this definition actually carries in it just a hint of shame. Because who's to say what is wrong or foolish behavior? I'm glad you asked because I went and looked it up. So the definition of wrong is considered unjust, dishonest, or immoral. Now we can fuss about what's considered immoral all day long. And we can even fuss about what we think dishonesty is all day long because a person's perception is their reality, right? But I think we all can appreciate the feeling of injustice. Like this shouldn't be. That is wrong. And I think that that is something, if we're going by this definition, this helps us to understand wrong isn't necessarily the 10 Commandments. And it's not necessarily anything you're going to find in religious law. It's not even something you're going to find in legal law. It's something you are going to find in what is considered unjust, dishonest, and immoral. That's what's real wrong. Okay. And then let's look at the definition of foolishness: lacking in good sense or judgment, unwise. And we can get intense about the verbiage on some of these, but this is the basic definitions we're going to go by. We all know when something seems silly versus serious. We can sense that in our bodies. We can all appreciate what judgment feels like receiving and also feels like projecting. And we can also appreciate what unwise can feel like. When we look back at life choices we've made, that wasn't a wise choice, but it might have been the only choice that you had. And that would be one way I would reframe it for you to also combat the shame for you. Okay. How to know when shame is present. So important to know, because shame is something that we have learned how to weaponize in our society. And we've weaponized it and normalized it so much that it's kind of a part of everyday life in a more unfortunate way. So the first sign that we know shame is present is denial. That's not what's happening. That is not how I remember it. It also sounds like gaslighting. That is how you know shame is present. When we attack ourselves, I'm so dumb. I shouldn't have done that thing. I made such a stupid choice. If I have a client who's doing healing work and they are stuck in the shame spiral of attacking themselves, they're not going to get very far in their journey because they're going to get paralyzed by shame. Okay. When they're attacking other people, this person's a moron, that person didn't do the thing they said they do, yada, 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 on and on and on. People who are attacking others are feeling shame. And I want you to take a moment right now and just sense in your body, maybe you're feeling shame. Maybe you're feeling a tension somewhere. Maybe you're sensing a color. And just recognize what that is so that when you're going forward and you're seeing one of these 4 things happen, denial, attack self, attack others, withdraw, you can remember this felt sense of shame and really get into like, why am I having that? And once you start getting curious around it, you've already started combating it. You've already let shame know it doesn't get to control this here. I also liken shame to a shepherd's staff. So the staff that a shepherd has is not meant to beat the sheep. It might beat off predators, fools, immoral people. It might be a protector, but it is not meant to beat the sheep. The only time that the staff actually comes in contact with the sheep is when it's bringing one back into the fold. And if we were to use shame as to bring others in versus pushing them away, that would be real, pure shame, and in the best way. If you ask Reverend PJ, he'll tell you that shame is a luxury and I'm sorry? An indulgence. He would say that shame is an indulgence. And I don't totally disagree with him, but it's something that I have to sit with a little longer in my practice before I'm ready to go all the way there with that. But I can appreciate why he would say it's an indulgence. If you have healthy shame, I believe that's true. But if you are a survivor of trauma who's been beaten down with shame, who's had it projected onto you, I don't know that you're going to agree with the indulgence piece, because it's also something that we will use in survival, because it will help us stay in survival. We'll be too ashamed to leave our toxic families of origin because we are so comfortable in the familiar hell that they bring us, that the idea of a shamelessly lived life without them scares us. So we'll stay in that shame bind. And that's just a perspective as a survivor that I think is worth sharing. All right, so how to respond when shame is present. So when I see denial happening, I want to recognize that it is happening, because once you start recognizing that denial is happening, and you can say it's happening and it's happening because of shame, and it's their shame, not my shame, or maybe it is my shame and I need to examine and get curious around why I'm having that shame. That's how you're going to respond when you see denial happening. When you are attacking yourself, again, the act of reframing. If you aren't telling your truth through the lens of compassion, you're probably shaming yourself. And it's super easy to do. But if you are reframing all things in compassion, courage, and curiosity, you are combating attacking yourself with shame. When we see attacking of others, I want to attack somebody else. I just need to get responsible. Sometimes I have to remind myself, you know who you're dealing with. This person is incapable of whatever for whatever reason. And you know that from your patterns of working with them. Stop expecting something of them that's not fair. That's just going to create shame. It's going to create shame for you for not learning the lesson. It's going to create shame for them because they're letting you down on a premise that they were never set for themselves. You did. And then when it comes to withdraw, reconnection is the answer here. When someone has gone out, when we don't hear from someone for a while, maybe there's shame in the space and we need to reach out to them and bring them back in and let them know, like, it's okay to be a human being. I had a rupture situation last week where someone came at me really hard in a meeting in front of everybody about, you didn't prepare us for this shift that you were going to make in our community, and you just went out and did this thing. And it was a great thing that I did, but the way I did it didn't sit well with this person, and they had to let me know in front of everybody. And so I withdrew. I was like, I hear you. Thank you for taking care of yourself. I did a little reflecting with them and I left. And I came back the next week to the same meeting. And the very first thing they did was, I kind of attacked you last week and I owe you an apology. And they took responsibility. We sat with it and we were able to reconnect because I allowed for the combating of shame to happen there. And I said, I see your perspective. I understand. And I reflected for them again what they had told me. And then I shared, that must have made you feel like this. That might have made you feel like that. And I didn't take any of that into consideration. Is there anything left that I can do? And they let me know. We reconnected, we repaired. And it was beautiful because we actually became closer for it. So you've probably heard the phrase trauma bonding before. This is something I would call a healing bond. So we got closer and reconnected, and we have a better understanding and relationship now because we did a healing bonding conversation. All right, I want to talk about the brain-heart connection. All right. So with your brain has electrical impulses. And your heart has magnetic ones. And this is important because the brain, every thought that you have, every memory that comes up for you, that narrative that you let play in the background of your brain, it's all electrical impulses going through your brain and shaping it, either for better or for worse. When it comes to your heart is going to speed up, slow down, get off rhythm, stay on rhythm in accordance to what's being fed to it through the messaging system of your nervous system. And that is through also from your electrical impulses in the brain. So when I say you are an electronic and magnetic being and magical, I'm not kidding. But it's also important to remember that just like your brain is doing this when you're in survival, it's also doing this when you're healing. And one of the things at the association we focus on is helping people rewire their neural pathways so that when they are sending these electrical impulses and this energy through their body, it is conducive to healing and health and wholeness versus staying stuck in survival. When I start making choices in service to survival, my next choice is almost always going to be deeper and deeper and deeper into survival. And that's why a lot of trauma survivors from childhood feel like they can't get ahead in life because it just continues to stack against them all of the shame, all of the hurt, all of the trauma, every meal that they have with their family where their abusers are allowed at the table, just re-traumatizing and creating a more complex dynamic in the brain and making it hostile in there. But if I, as your coach, am helping you reframe all things in compassion, courage, and curiosity, and we're combating shame, and we are using rhythm, we are rising to meet ourselves, we are resolving what is frozen and blocked, and we are reframing things from what no longer serves us to what really empowers us. That's literally electrical impulses now switched. The energy has switched to health and life and longevity and success and wealth. And so it really is important, like what you think you are, you become. And it's because you are creating an electrical imprint in your brain. All right. And that's being fed into your magnet, your pumping magnet, which is your heart. And they'll tell you there's some controversy if it's 6 feet, if it's 60 feet, but we all have a magnetic field that has a kind of like a wave. And with each beat of the heart is another wave or ripple rather in your magnetic field that extends 6 feet from your body in a complete circle around the body from your heart all the way 6 feet out is this magnetic field. So if you're an empath and somebody's standing next to you, you can already tell if their electrical impulses in their brain are sending life and health and abundance, or if they might have ill intent. You can just sense it like a hound dog on a scent, like it's just there. It's so imprinted, and you sometimes carry it with you. It can be so strong that if you're not grounded and centered and anchored, that your heart is gonna respond to theirs, and you're going to feel a heavier countenance. Maybe you're going to feel the shame burden that they're carrying. Maybe you will start to get triggered with your own trauma that has similar origins as their own. And so it's very important as empaths that the way you guard your heart and the way you fortify your mind is by remembering to stay grounded and centered and anchored, so that when you're out, you're not being affected by someone else's energy. Now let's talk about the nervous system. I am a total nervous system nerd. I love this topic. It's my favorite thing in the whole wide world. So in this picture, admittedly, I have this is actually a picture of the circulatory system, but it works very much like the nervous system. And I will show you a little bit more clearly what I mean by that in a second. But your autonomic nervous system has within it 4 systems: the sympathetic nervous system, the ventral vagal nervous system, the parasympathetic nervous system, and the dorsal vagal nervous system. Okay, now notice there are 4 of these, and we've already talked about there's 4 Fs: fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. And yes, they land in each of these. And I will show you where and how and why. Okay. So here you see the spinal column. So when you think about the nervous system, it actually comes from the base of your brain and it goes all the way down your spine. And that's really where, in a more scientifically accurate space, the nervous system lands. Okay. So that's another reason why neck, brain, and back injuries are really, really important to understand. If you should ever have any of those, you will appreciate why your nervous system might be a little more intense. 6:30. Okay, let me move on. All right. So let's also talk about, before we go any deeper into that, let's talk about the window of capacity. You've probably heard it called the window of tolerance. All right. So here in the window, you see this white wave. This is kind of just a regulated body nervous system situation. At the top of the window, we have hyperarousal. At the bottom of the window, we have hypoarousal. You'll hear it called dorsal flop or drop or faint. And in hyperarousal, that's the deer in the headlights space. Okay. And this safety. So this is like what science, this would be in your textbook. This is it. This 2-dimensional, here it is. Okay. I'm going to challenge that a little bit. I'm going to show you this new layer. Okay. This is where your nervous systems drop. So if you were to imagine your window of capacity as also being that brain spinal column space, also imagine this is where those nervous systems land. And by the way, when you are in a space of trauma reactivity, it is common that you can be in more than one of these nervous systems. You can be ping-ponging in and out of them at the same time. So just know that it's not like you're going to be able to say, oh, you're in the sympathetic and you're having a hyper freeze, and this is how we respond to it with rest, and then we're going to do some breath work and good job. It's never going to get to be that easy. It's actually a lot more complicated than that. But I also, as you can see here, went ahead and brought out the chakras again, because it's kind of interesting. I didn't do this but I sort of did. It's kind of interesting though, how they line up. That dorsal vagal space with those lower chakras, when you think about the sacral chakra, you think about like the belly button space. And if you look at dorsal vagal, this is rest and digest. This is the parasympathetic nervous system and the dorsal vagal nervous system tell your body, we have gas and we're bloated. Oh my goodness, survival. Or that was a very good nourishing meal. Thank you. I will digest that properly now and we will eliminate appropriately. When you look at your ventral nerve and your sympathetic nerve, the way you breathe, the way your heart beats, sometimes you get chest pain. Sometimes you're going to hold tension in your neck and shoulders. You might be landing more in your sympathetic nervous system and some ventral. So things to keep in mind. Also, cute story, when you're thinking about the dorsal vagal nervous system, dorsal, I want you to take a moment and think about Eeyore. So Eeyore is the donkey from Winnie the Pooh. And what Eeyore has down his spine is a dorsal stripe. That's what they call that in donkeys, is a dorsal stripe. That's literally a picture of their dorsal vagal nervous system right there in nature. And if you remember Eeyore, would you say he was a hyper arousal guy or more of that ho-hum hypo? Long-eared, hard life, everything is sad. He resides in the dorsal vagal space. And so next time you're thinking about what is the nervous system with Flop, the dorsal nervous system is going to be Eeyore from Winnie the Pooh. Just a little picture there for you. All right, now let's look at the fight, flight, and freeze responses in this layering of your window of capacity. So fight, of course, is the more sympathetic nervous system. Flight is also going to be more in your sympathetic nervous system, and your hyper freeze is going to land more in the sympathetic nervous system. And it makes sense that the hyper freeze, that deer in the headlights, is going to land in the hyper arousal space of your window of capacity. On the flip side, you're going to see that we have fawning and freezing, and that's going to land in that hypo and in that parasympathetic and dorsal vagal space. Okay. So that just kind of gives you an idea of how it looks scientifically when you're geeking out. And then here's what it looks like with rest. And notice rest is in there. Also notice the rigidity that just happened with that white wave that was in there. Look at how rigid it just got. You can ping pong up and down, in and out around this bad boy all day long at any given time. And it is a perfectly normal human experience. There's nothing crazy about that. There's nothing shameful about it. This is just what it looks like. So this is life. And I want to normalize it for people. So this is how rhythm, rise, resolve, reframe, and reflect. Resolve, reflect is in there. I'll go into that one a little bit more later. This is what it looks like though. Okay. Nope, I'm going to go ahead and move past this one because we don't need it. So here we're cleaning it up a little bit. I'm just taking the layers down so you can kind of see where we started, how we got there, with, of course, the 4 Fs. And now let's shift into this, the real experience of this. Did this just go backwards? Like, yes, it did. That's why we're going to just go through all these one more time. Here we go. This is how, notice how much more depth there is here. You are not a white wave of regulated emotion. You are a complex, magical being. And your lived experiences, traumatic or otherwise, how you perceive them, how you file them away, are this beautiful, layered, deep, complex. And that is why there is no one size fits all when it comes to treatment and recovery. That is why we cannot pathologize people with diagnosis and medications all the time. Some of those things can be helpful, absolutely. I don't want to poo-poo on Western medicine completely, but I will poo-poo on Big Pharma. And I will call out that, again, this is body wisdom. We didn't add any medications. We didn't add any mindful movement. We didn't do anything special here tonight, but just show you this is what you already have in you. Okay. And this is what it looks like. How beautifully complicated is this? Oh my goodness. Rhythm, rise, resolve, and reframe right here in your window of capacity with all your nervous system. You can ping pong through all of these. You can be ebbing and flowing through all of these. And this is what it looks like when I'm in sessions with clients, is that sometimes it's going to be a happy yellow, and we're going to have happy yellow parts from childhood to modern day present moments. So sometimes we're going to have these more heavy, moody blues where we're going to feel alive, but we need a good cry, or maybe we need to flop down and get dorsal for a minute. And there is no shame in having any and all of these. They are normal. I think in society, there's been this idea that if you're having fight, flight, freeze, and fawn, and you're in survival, you're somehow weak. You're somehow less than human. You're somehow not enough. And I just want to remind us all that all of those things are ancestral wisdom kept in your body for the purposes of survival. And now you can use them with rest and shift from survival to thriving. So that's something we'll go into that a little bit more. Please stop being rude, technology. All right. So here's how you know it's a restorative response. Does it come from the space of compassion or curiosity? Yes or no? And if it doesn't, then ask yourself, was this response that I had possibly trauma or shame? And if I start looking at how I'm behaving in the world and reacting to the world, and whether or not it's from trauma or shame, then these are what we call miscues. They're cries of unmet needs, things that I should go and heal and feel. And then when I come back around and I'm having a restorative response and I'm acting from compassion, courage, and curiosity, I'm not causing more damage in the world. Hurting people hurt people, right? But the healer is very complicated and can do both in any given moment. But if they're doing their own healing work, it's going to show because of how they do or don't respond to the world around them. So when it comes to shame and suffering from trauma, it's a disconnect between our being and our higher self. And you can call that higher self whatever you want. But to reconnect requires first with yourself compassion. Every time I log off with my clients, I'm telling them, be kind to yourself. It's super easy to forget to do. I'm always asking people to have compassion for others, and maybe compassion looks like withdrawing from somebody. Maybe compassion looks like I'm setting boundaries. And maybe it looks like I call them to have a restorative meeting. All right. If you're capable of that and you can do it in compassion, go for it. To reconnect requires courage. Courage is not the same thing as bravery. You can, I encourage everyone to check out HBO and check out Brene Brown's Atlas of the Heart series, because she does a beautiful job of walking through the differences between connection and control, and what courage and bravery is, and sympathy and compassion and empathy, and all the different meanings. And it even helped me understand my own emotional state better. To reconnect with our higher self is going to require curiosity. Curiosity is the anti of shame. All right. So again, rhythm, rise, resolve, and reframe. And I go a lot deeper in detail about this in my book and what they are and how they work. So if you haven't had an opportunity, please check out the chat box and check out my book. And with that, I'm going to come back into the room here with everybody. Stop share. There we go. All right. And exit out of this. And I just want to open the floor for any questions or comments from anyone in the space tonight. I know I sent a lot of information your way, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot more questions as you have time to just let some of this land. But feel free to, matter of fact, I'll go ahead and stop recording here so that this can be a little more intimate and private. Thank you all.